So if the suggestion is I'm going to be swayed by some lobbyist contribution, then I think the natural progression of that logic doesn't work very well for you, Carolyn, since you've had a reasonable estimate would say $20,000 put into your campaign by interest groups, 15 by one union. So if we're going to talk about who's going to be swayed by the people funding their campaign,
I think we're actually talking about providing information, not who is going to be swayed by a campaign. But I think Dan's question is about, he suggests that I made some promises that I don't intend to keep or that are somehow not in the interest of our district in getting the support of teachers in the area. That's absolutely not true. I've been as forthright with Mass teachers as I have been with the public in a number of interactions with the public. So again, I openly will make available the questionnaire to anyone who requests it.
Are we clear on that?
I guess we are.
Well, I'll just let that pass. We want to get into the game part of the program, if you don't mind. What we had talked about was what is the cost benefit of dismantling the Massachusetts Turnpike Authority? How could the state replace those revenues used now to help pay off the massive Big Dig bill? Please explain how the loss of tolls versus recovery of abused expenditures would be reconciled. So, the game portion of the program, let's watch you two negotiate the settlement of the Turnpike Authority and the toll elimination here and now. Carolyn will give you first word.
Well, negotiate is sort of an interesting approach, I think.
I'm not sure what that means either.
Yeah, I think Dan and I just have very different. I will say that Dan and I both agree clearly that increased tolls for Metro West commuters is something that is extremely unfair, something that can't continue, and something that needs to be addressed as soon as possible. And we both have expressed pleasure that the governor has at least acknowledged this issue and is making it something that's on the front burner. I think where we differ is in how we intend to approach this issue of toll equity. So what I would prefer to do rather than negotiate, because I think quite clearly we have very different positions, is perhaps just to explain our different positions and let the voters decide which seems most appropriate. Any discussion, there are two parts to this question. First is about the merger of Mass Highway and the Turnpike Authority. And then the second issue, while related, which is really a separate issue, which is the issue of getting rid of tolls. The first issue related to the cost benefit of dismantling the Pike and merging it with Mass Highway. This question has come up of whether I support the merger. And frankly, I'm open to the merger. From an outside perspective, it sounds like there could be efficiencies gained in that merger, and I think we should look at that. However, the fact is there has been no cost benefit that I've seen other than some cursory review that was done by the Mass Taxpayers Foundation in evaluating this proposal that suggests that there may be some reasons to merge these authorities, but cost savings is probably not going to be significant. So if we are talking about a merger, I think we have to be very clear on what the goals are and what the expectations are of what we're going to receive for savings, if any. And frankly, that just needs to be, laying out the numbers and taking a look at that, and absolutely that's something that we should do going forward. The second issue, which I think is a little more pointed between Dan and I, is the issue of getting rid of tolls. Dan has proposed to get rid of tolls, and I'm sure he'll talk to you about that. I don't believe that we can talk about tolls without including a discussion about the impact of congestion on our major roadways and in the city of Boston. And because of congestion issues, I don't favor taking down the tolls simply because I believe it will put more traffic on the Pike and it will put more cars in the city when we're already challenged to accommodate the traffic that we have. What I would prefer to see is something similar to what Mayor Bloomberg proposed for New York, which did not pass, but it is an approach which puts tolls on the major artery leading into the city with toll funds dedicated to support an increased investment in public transportation. That means that all toll funding would be dedicated to improving the transportation system so that over time we would have a more robust public transportation alternative for those commuters that don't want to take their cars into the city, which I think, public transportation is clearly something that we need to increase and something that the city of Boston and the metro area falls behind other cities in getting that done. I think this is a way to do that, as well as a way to continue to fund transportation that we need.
Dan?
Well, a couple things. We do have a fundamental difference here, and again, this difference has come to light multiple times. And to her credit, my opponent has been very firm. She said we shouldn't take down tolls. Taking down tolls is not the direction we want to head. Taking down tolls is not in our long-term interests. She said she wants to expand tolls. She wants to put them back on the Western Pike, where Governor Weld took them down a number of years ago. I was very pleased to see Governor Patrick 2 weeks ago now say that in his revamp of the state's transportation system, it is his hope, and he was speaking first person, it is my hope that we can take down the tolls on the Massachusetts Turnpike, other than the ones at the state border. That is much closer to my position, take down all the tolls, than to my opponent's position, leave the ones we have, put them back on the Western Pike, and put them everywhere else. The put them everywhere else notion, that's a good soundbite for people to say everybody ought to pay the same that we pay. That's another example of what I view as evidence that my opponent simply doesn't understand how the State House works. There is no chance that our legislature is voting to toll other roads in Massachusetts, nor frankly do I think they ought to. The tolling system is incredibly inefficient, incredibly wasteful. It's given to patronage, corruption. It ought to be eliminated, not duplicated. But to come back a little bit and talk about the benefits of the merger, it kind of amazes me that in the face of now the governor saying that merging the Turnpike with Mass Highway is a centerpiece of his economic recovery program, my opponent still continues to say, well, we need to look at whether there'd be cost benefit. I have very serious experience with the Turnpike. I was in the administration when Governor Romney fought for the first 3 years of his administration to get control of the Turnpike because it was such a mess. So obviously a mess, but such a closed mess, an independent authority with no transparency. Then the ceiling in the Big Dig fell on a woman and killed her, and all of a sudden the legislature couldn't wait to give Governor Romney control of the Turnpike. But that allowed us to do some very serious analysis in the final months of the administration of the Turnpike. My opponent said she hasn't seen any evaluation of cost-benefit of merger. I have, and it's a public document. It was the Governor's Turnpike Task Force report issued at the end of the administration, where several experts in conjunction with independent auditor KPMG came in and audited the Turnpike. And the inefficiencies there are mind-boggling. I'll give you just a few. First of all, the incremental cost of collecting tolls is 30% of every dollar. So 30 cents on every dollar collected in tolls goes to the cost of collecting those tolls. So if you say we've got $175 million that we collect in tolls every year, roughly, we've already got $52.5 million of that just goes to the cost of collecting that $175 million. Then we take $100 million out of that goes directly to service the debt on the Big Dig, which in 1997 our legislature, in all its wisdom, decided a tiny slice of commuters who live in a certain direction, our direction, from Boston, ought to bear the debt burden for the largest public works project in the history of the planet. That was wrong when it happened, and it's wrong today. So you take that $100 million out, and now we're looking at revenues from tolls, $22.5 million, actual revenues.